What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And as the host of Locked On Rockets, today we'll be discussing Jabari Smith Jr. and why he had such a rough start to his NBA career, how he's starting to kind of get into a groove and finding himself as a player over these last 5 or 6 games or so. Plus, Jalen Green adding playmaking to his game much earlier than anticipated and how that's making him an even more deadly force on offense. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Tonight, I'm taking Luka Doncic to score more than 26.5 points. How about LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds? Or maybe Kevin Durant to have less than 6.5 assists? And what about Steph Curry more than 3.5 three-pointers made? So what is Prize Picks, right? How does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, NHL, PGA, you name it, they've got you covered for it over at Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And now it's me, Jackson Gatlin, host of Locked On Rockets. You can follow on Twitter at JT Gatlin. Let's talk about Jabari Smith Jr. and his struggles to start his NBA career. Look, this was the number 3 overall pick in this last year's draft. For much of the pre-draft cycle, the guy that was mocked consensus number 1 across many draft boards. And he really didn't kind of live up to many of the expectations set for him across, the first chunk of his NBA career. Now, why is that? It's kind of a multifaceted problem. So Jabari Smith Jr. actually came out of the gate really strong in his first preseason game with the Rockets, drilled a bunch of three-pointers against the San Antonio Spurs, looked exactly as advertised, and then unfortunately, he suffered an ankle injury in Rockets practice that sidelined him for the remainder of preseason. Then he came out and he made it, back in time to the lineup for the season opener against the Atlanta Hawks. But he just, he wasn't quite hitting the shots that you would normally expect for a shooter of his caliber to hit. And then over time, after, that season opener and then a few more games go by, and you could tell that there was something off a little bit where the shots weren't going in, and he started to kind of get down on himself. And Jabari Smith Jr. is an incredibly confident individual, an incredibly confident young man. But at any point when you're missing that many shots and you're missing wide open looks that are being created by your teammates, eventually you're going to start to, maybe second guess yourself. And that's exactly what happened. Is he started getting kind of hesitant with the shots that he was taking. He wasn't making good decisions on the basketball floor. And then couple that with the fact that he probably wasn't at quite 100% after recovering from that ankle injury, maybe came back not necessarily a little bit too soon, but was maybe playing at like 85 and 90% capacity. And that, kind of adding to the fact that maybe he wasn't trusting his body to its fullest potential. Whereas now, over these last probably about 5 or 6 games or so, Jabari Smith Jr. looks like a completely night and day different player. He said recently in a post-game media availability after the Rockets' big win against the Atlanta Hawks the day after Thanksgiving that he finally has his legs back under him. And he is now exploding off the ground, skying for rebounds, rebounding at an incredible rate compared to the early part of the season where there were even some question marks about, hey, like, where's the rebounding? Where's the defensive intensity? Where's all the things that were kind of marketed as Jabari Smith Jr.'s strengths in the early going of this Rockets season? So it kind of feels like there was that stretch where he came back from injury, wasn't quite himself, maybe got down on himself a little bit because he wasn't making the shots that he's normally accustomed to making. And then there was like this weird curve in his like field goal attempts where he was shooting a lot of threes early on, and then it dipped where you could see like the confidence starting to wane, where it went from like 8 or 9 attempts per game down to like 3 or 4 attempts per game. And then over these last 5 or 6 games for the Rockets, it's going back up to where he's now attempting again 8, 9, 10, 11 threes per game because the confidence is now back. He's playing so much more aggressively. He's looking for his shot. He's letting it fly from long distance, and it's working well. The Rockets are riding a 2-game win streak now, picking up a win against the Atlanta Hawks right after Thanksgiving, and then a win on the second night of a back-to-back against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Both games where Jabari Smith Jr. was incredibly impactful in the rebounding department, had strong offensive nights, all of that. So he's starting to put it together. The game is maybe slowing down a little bit for him. And then on top of that, he's probably back to 100% where he can trust his body again, saying he's got his legs under him, being able to really be that imposing physical presence, all 6'11" of him on the defensive side, making his presence felt in the rebounding department. All the things that he was advertised as being able to do during the pre-draft cycle is now kind of coming to fruition. So for anybody who labeled or was trying to label Jabari Smith Jr. a bust because of his struggles to kind of start the season, you don't grade a rookie on being a rookie, right? Rookies are going to have ups and downs, but it's nice to see him kind of starting to settle into his groove as an NBA player. Now, changing gears here a little bit to the Houston Rockets backcourt, from the number 3 overall pick in Jabari Smith Jr. to the number 2 overall pick from a couple summers ago, Jalen Green. Look, last season, Jalen Green proved that he was an absolute bucket. He went on a huge scoring tear to close the season. He was the only rookie last year to have a 40-point game. This year, he's been continuing that trend. He basically has had a really phenomenal year, apart from just, it was a 4-game stretch, a West Coast swing where the Rockets had a really brutal schedule, and Jalen really struggled during those 4 games out on the West Coast. But aside from that little pocket where he was in a shooting slump, he was really good before those games, and he's been really good since those games. In fact, in the 10 games since that West Coast swing, Jalen Green is averaging 24 points per game, about 4.5 rebounds per night, and 5.5 assists per game on 63% true shooting. And the thing that's really stood out about Jalen Green is he can score from anywhere on the floor. He can shoot threes. He can get it going in the mid-range. He can attack the rim. He's added some muscle to his frame this season. He added about 5 to 10 pounds of muscle this past offseason. And so now he's able to finish through contact a little bit better at the rim. He's getting to the free throw line at a better rate this year than he was last year, kind of not necessarily dealing with the rookie whistle anymore. But past all of that, because we knew that Jalen Green was a scorer, he is now facilitating at such a high level. And this wasn't something that was to be expected out of Jalen Green. You could see flashes of it last season, and when you looked at his tape with the G League, you thought, okay, he probably is going to be able to add some playmaking to his bag over time. But in my eyes, I thought, okay, 3 to 4 years from now, right? Something like that, something reasonable. But the way that he's added the playmaking so quickly just in his second year as a player for a guy who was basically projected to just be a bucket getter at the NBA level has been fantastic. He just had his career high in assists against the OKC Thunder, had 9 assists, which, one more and he would have had his first career double-double with assists. But it's the way that he's learning how to facilitate, where he's making life easier for his teammates by leveraging his scoring gravity and snaking through pick and rolls and finding the big man, as they're rolling to the rim, or faking right at the cup and then getting the big man on his heels, or faking out the defender to then set up his teammate for an easy look right at the rim. Understanding how to attack in transition and being unselfish with the basketball. And I think that's kind of the thing that sometimes these bucket getting 2 guards, like the Jalen Greens, the Devin Bookers, the Bradley Beals of the world, they come out and they get maybe labeled unfairly because, their primary skill is scoring. And especially if all you're doing is scoring on a bad team, then maybe people will look at it as empty stats or empty calories as far as a player is concerned. But for Jalen, he's really made it a point to involve his teammates and to find ways to make guys around him better and to impact the game in ways besides just scoring, because he can score at will almost. He's got a lightning quick first step. Nobody can stay in front of him in the NBA. And now that he's able to get to the free throw line significantly more than he was his rookie year, he's almost unstoppable offensively. Adding the playmaking to that unlocks more for him, unlocks more for his teammates, because now, rather than treating Jalen Green as a one-dimensional scoring threat, now you have to treat him as both a scoring threat and a threat to pass the ball and create for his teammates. And those two those two things kind of feed into each other to where now it's just opening up all these opportunities within the Rockets offense. And Jalen Green is now looking like one of the deadliest players offensively in the NBA if this trend continues. He's currently riding a streak right now where he's had 4 or more assists in the last 8 straight games as, playing for the Rockets. And I mean, if that trend continues where he's able to average 4, 5, 6 some odd assists a game, as well as scoring at the rate he's currently at, which he's ranked 21st in the NBA in points per game as a sophomore, the sky's the limit for this guy. He's going to probably lead the NBA one day in scoring. And if the playmaking trend continues, he might also be somebody who's able to keep be a top assist guy as well further down the line. So for more on Jabari Smith Jr. and him settling into his NBA career and Jalen Green and his growth as a playmaker and as an offensive force in the NBA, be sure to check out Locked On Rockets.